means the world.
Tell me the story of the Princess of Aleppo.
Merci.
De rien.
Look at me! You know what to see? See a bad mother.
A touching tale of exile seen through the eyes of a young Syrian, the eclectic career of Larry Cohen, and a long-awaited French blockbuster, all coming up in today's film show. And for that, we're joined by critic Lisa Nesselson by Skype, and filmmaker Marya Zarif is in the studio with us. Hello, Marya. Thanks for being here. Now, your film, Dounia and the Princess of Aleppo, is on French screens right now. We'll be chatting about it in detail in just a moment. But first, I wanted to ask you, as an illustrator, this is your first feature-length film. Was cinema always an ambition for you, or were you more in the world of comics, graphic novels?
No, I think it was always an ambition for me. First of all, I think of myself as a storyteller, you know. So I'm someone who writes story, who tells stories through the graphics. So the idea of having them moving, doing music, doing movement was always in me since I was a little girl. I always knew that I would do animation feature films, and it happened. So I'm very happy for this.
It certainly seems very natural for this story.
Yes.
Now, one comic, one character I'm sure you will have heard of is Asterix, France's favourite little Gaul. Asterix and Obelix, The Middle Kingdom, is out now and sees the duo fighting their Roman foes on new territory in China. Its all-star cast includes Guillaume Canet, Marion Cotillard and the footballer Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Catherine Kadir-Clifford has more.
Devenir le nouvel empereur de Chine. Rassurez-moi, vous savez où c'est la Chine quand même?
Never have Asterix and Obelix ventured so far to squabble with their Roman foes. But even in China, all the classic ingredients are still in the mix. Pirates, domestic drama, and a generous dose of smackings.
Merci.
De rien.
This time, though, love is in the air.
Si je suis amoureux.
All this brought to life by a cast of French cinema A-listers, as well as some major names less known to the big screen.
When they offered me the role, I didn't know what I was getting myself in for, but it was a great experience, my first real experience in film.
For over 60 years, Asterix has been bursting with cultural references.
Qu'est-ce que tu veux manger d'autre, toi?
Les légumes.
Des légumes. Des légumes?
This time there's a focus on veganism. Over the decades, the volumes have put the spotlight on the Berlin Wall in The Great Divide and feminism in The Secret Weapon.
René Goscinny always managed to infuse daily life and contemporary issues into the dialogue between his Gauls. It brings a real comic touch.
Guillaume Canet played Asterix on screen, as well as steering ship behind the camera.
I was extremely stressed. I felt a lot of pressure. I wanted the public to be happy with the film.
At the premiere in Paris, the audience seemed convinced.
We had a laugh, it was good.
Très réussi.
It was very well done. There was a good balance between modern humor and respect for Asterix tradition.
These characters have managed to climb out of their comic strips and find a new lease of life, starring in 10 animations and 5 feature-length films. They've even outlived their founding fathers, René Goscinny and Albert Uderzo, gracing the pages of 5 more volumes in the hands of a next-generation duo. Asterix and Obelix remain immortal.
So, Lisa, as we saw in that report, this is quite the film event here in France.
Oh, it's on screens everywhere you turn, nationwide. This year, French filmmakers will be proudly embracing homegrown French heroes, including a lavish new 2-part film about the Three Musketeers. Now, the core idea of the Asterix books, that a pocket of brave Gauls will not be dominated, is quintessentially French and an inspiration to people everywhere who would rather not capitulate to invaders. The stories are also very funny. Now, one of the reasons France is able to make so many films is that the average budget for a French movie is between 5.5 and 6.5 million euros, and that's probably the catering budget for an Avatar film. But when French producers decide to invest a lot in a movie, they can. And they have access to some of the best digital effects people in the business. Asterix and Obelix go back to 1959 as comic books, so almost everybody walking around in France knows the characters, and there are everyday colloquial expressions in the French language that were directly inspired by the comics.
It is certainly a cultural staple. Well, now to another imagined universe, but one that's much closer to the present day. Marya, your film Dounia and the Princess of Aleppo paints a very evocative portrait of your hometown, Aleppo, and manages to weave the magic of childhood into a fundamentally tragic tale with the current conflict there as a backdrop. Let's get a feel for a film in this clip.
Our new home, is it in Greece, Chateau? The Princess of Aleppo.
Dounia.
Now, Lisa, just briefly, you've seen the film. Give us the pitch.
Well, today's guest created her film's absolutely delightful 6-year-old protagonist in a graphic novel that has now been extended into this eventful and touching fantasy inspired by the real tribulations of ordinary Syrians forced to leave their war-torn country under the loving care of her music-loving grandfather and accomplished cook of a grandmother. Dounia sets off on a journey into exile, and she can call upon one of the handful of magic seeds she brought with her when the going gets especially tough. The original book, I'm told, offers an augmented reality app, so the animated film seems like a logical next step.
Okay. Well, Marya, one thing that struck me about the film was how important food, smells, spices were in Dounia's day-to-day life. Was this something that you remember from your childhood? How big a role does food play in Syrian culture?
It is a capital role. It's not only from my childhood. I've grown up in Aleppo till I was 20, and I used to make a lot of back and forth. It's very fundamental in Syrian culture in general, in Aleppo culture, which is known for the cooking and for the love of the food and for the love of products, and it's kind of really entangled to the roots of the Syrian identity. So the smells, the colors, the tastes was something I needed to show also to empower the life in this movie, to show how much of a life they had, how much this city was full of life, and it's still full of life and wonders, and that they are people who loved life, you know, before it happened to them, before the tragedy happened to them, and after the tragedy even, they love life, they know how to live, they have a great art of life, you know, art de vivre, and this is something I wanted to show you.
Now, we know that it takes a very long time to make an animated film. It's a painstaking process. Were there things that took place in Syria while you were working on the film project that forced you to adjust your story?
No, not at all, because it didn't take too long. We worked on it for 2 years and a half. It started as an animated series in Canada for the French-Canadian TV, and then we worked on the animated series and we extended it into a long feature film. So, you know, it was not very long. We did it in a time record frame of 2 years and a half, and the events that took place in Dounia, in the animated movie, were about in the beginning of the wars, like 2013, 2015, and most of the events, most of the story, the core story was still the same, and still happening till now, you know. There are still people fleeing in this way, and migrants taking the road in this way, and facing the same difficulties.
This is what I wanted to ask you as well. Dounia could be one of any of the 6 million Syrians who've had to leave the country, with the same amount of people there internally displaced. Almost 12 years after that conflict broke out, do you see the Syrian diaspora now becoming a fixed reality? And what does that mean for the future of the people and their culture?
That's a very good question. Yes, it is a fixed reality, but it has been. Syria has been a community. It has had a foreign community for a long, long time. Syria and Lebanon and all the Middle East in general. But now the numbers are very, very big. The Syrian diaspora is indeed very alive, very vivid. Also, it has experienced big media spotlights, and it has experienced a lot of hardship. And But at the same time, it's a diaspora that is very united and that it is very, very linked to the inside of Syria. So I see it as, at the same time, as the blessing and the curse, you know? So it's a very hard thing we've been through, and they've been through, but at the same time, it united us, and it had lots of painters, of our artists in Syria. Lots of people are just producing beautiful art, are just gathering together, are creating a new way of seeing our culture. So this is the blessing in the curse.
Artists like yourself, of course, contributing to that culture. Well, finally, we're going to take a look at American independent cinema now. The Cinémathèque Française is staging a retrospective of the films of director and screenwriter Larry Cohen. Lisa, tell us a bit more about this one.
Well, Larry Cohen's imagination and sly sense of social satire produced a lot of very entertaining, relatively low-budget movies. He also created the 1960s TV show The Invaders, and as a kid, I found it perfectly reasonable that the aliens walking around in American society could be recognized by the fact that they couldn't bend their pinky fingers. Cohen died in 2019 after bequeathing us monster movies and socially aware action films built around Black protagonists. From the Private Files of J. Edgar Hoover is a serious 1977 film about Hoover's unholy grip on his fellow Americans and elected officials. The Stuff from 1985 gleefully sends up marketing and advertising, and Cohen also penned some terrific screenplays for other directors, including Joel Schumacher's Phone Game in 2002, in which Colin Farrell answers a ringing phone in a phone booth. Remember those? And here's a sinister voice tell him that if he leaves the booth, terrible things will happen.
I do remember that one indeed. Lisa, thank you very much for the tip. And Marya, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll leave you with a taste of Larry Cohen's cinema. Otherwise, do check out our website for more movies, arts and culture. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.
Paid the cost to be the boss. Paid the cost to be the boss.